Greetings, folks, and welcome to the Art and Science of Awareness. Now, this is the series in which we interview researchers working on the cutting edge of mindfulness science. I'm John Roberts from Living Well Community, your home for interactive and on-demand wellness programming created and curated for you by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare and Tufts Health Plan. Now, I'm delighted to be joined this afternoon by Tara Healy, the founder and director of Mind the Moment, which is the mindfulness program of Harvard Pilgrim and Tufts Health Plan, and our very special guest, Dr. Amishi Jha. Now, besides being the author of the best-selling book Peak Mind, Amishi Jha is the director of contemplative neuroscience and a professor of psychology at the University of Miami. Amishi has been studying how mindfulness training can protect and improve attention, even in exceptionally high-stress environments. That has led her to work with first responders, elite athletes, and the U.S. military. We were also lucky enough to collaborate with Amishi on creating our Peak Mind resource hub, featuring articles, webinars, podcasts, and our free 4-week Peak Mind meditation challenge. Welcome to you both.
Thank
Great to
you,
be here.
John.
Now,
Yeah,
folks, we want you to be part of this conversation today as well. Please do open up the chat. Let us know your thoughts and questions as they arise throughout today's program. We will save time at the end to address them. But in the meantime, Tara, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and take us away.
thank you, John. And Amishi, great to be with you again. So happy to have this opportunity. So I want to start with a question that I have been asking all of the folks that join us for these special sessions, which is just what got you into this work? I think, many of us don't plan this professionally. And so would love to hear a little bit about your origin story. What drew you to the work, and what keeps you at it?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the chance to be able to share that. And I love being back here with you and John. So thanks for the time together. So I am a neuroscientist, as John mentioned, and I'd always been interested in the brain, probably, very early on or through my undergrad days. Studied the brain's attention system through my professional training. And one thing started happening as I spent most of my days thinking through really how attention works. How does this system work in the brain? And what we came to understand through all the brain imaging research and other kinds of brain science is that it's extremely powerful. So much so that I started referring to it as the brain's boss, meaning that wherever it is that we would direct our attention, it changed the nature of what the rest of the brain does.
Hmm.
So what started happening in my own lab, as I had my own lab, through my training, was I got kind of more and more worried. If something is this powerful, that it really has such a profound influence on information processing throughout the brain, what makes it fail? And so our initial studies on what makes it fail were trying to do things that I had a hunch probably would make them fail just from my own life experience. Things like having people come into the lab and do attentionally demanding tasks while we're actually paying attention to their brain function. We had brainwave recording equipment on them, or they were in a scanner, but we'd mess with them in certain ways. Now I say mess with them because, obviously all ethics approved, but we'd want to do things that made it a little bit of a challenge. So we'd have people come in and say things like, as they're performing the task, you need to go faster. You need to work a little harder at this. So kind of stressing them out. Or we would try to sour their mood. We'd play sad music or ask them to recall their negative events from their personal life. Not the worst thing that ever happened, but things that were tough. And then the last thing, the kind of thing we did was that we would do something called psychosocial threat. So this would be done by having people perform these tasks and saying things like, you're performing worse than anybody has ever performed. So really like a comparison mind would start coming up. These were done intentionally, and always debrief them after.
Yeah.
But what we saw through all of these things is that, yes, this very powerful system was indeed powerful. They could pay attention, but inducing these circumstances, stressing them out or making the mood poor or having this kind of threat to their kind of sense of well performance, reliably and repeatedly degraded attention. It made attention fail. So my lab started, I started thinking through, how do I pivot? How do I go from really understanding how attention works to now understanding how we can make it work better? Because these forces of being stressed out or in a bad mood or feeling a little bit vulnerable personally, they're not going to go away. They're part of life's, slings and arrows. But we need something that we might be able to do daily. And because I'm a brain scientist, part of that meant, how can we train the brain in some systematic way that would profoundly, if not profoundly, at least reliably, scientifically valid in a validated way, strengthen attention. So we tried a whole bunch of things to fast track through that part of the journey. And the only thing that we found was able to successfully protect attention was mindfulness training.
Wow.
So that became the focus of my lab's effort, not only to understand attention, but how can we train it best with mindfulness?
Yeah, so it's really remarkable just how powerful attention is. And you're seeing that through your research kind of kept you at it. I'm curious if the folks you tested had any idea of what you might be doing to influence their attention, or did you keep it, without them knowing?
Oh no, they knew that their attention was going to be evaluated. That was the thing. It
Okay.
wasn't, they knew that the thing they were coming in to do was have perform attention tasks, and that we would be watching them, watching their performance, watching their brain activity. And they knew that their job was to try to perform these attention tasks as best as they possibly
Okay.
could. So the first thing to say is that even though they knew that, they couldn't will themselves not to have their attention fail. It
Yes.
still failed. And by the way, it failed even if we didn't do any of these things. It's just the nature of attention
Yeah.
to, at some point, lapse. And we've done a lot of follow-up studies to see how often that happens. It happens quite often. But under these
Yeah.
circumstances, these negative, threatening kind of circumstances, it failed more quickly and more often.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I know personally, if I'm feeling stressed, I see it impacts my recall. Like I notice it right in that moment. I'll know what's going on. So, you know
Yeah.
what? I wonder, yeah, go ahead. Did you want to?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, what's kind of interesting about these kinds of, and I sometimes will refer to them as sort of kryptonite conditions, this
Mm,
stress, threat, and negative mood, because they really do cripple attention in this
yeah,
reliable way. But if you think about those things, like think about anybody listening, like your social media feed, almost every single thing that grabs your attention, that captures the attention, has qualities of being stressful, of being negative often, of being maybe threatening. And then, of course, there are other things that can capture attention too: novelty, personal relevance, those types of things. So, the sort of paradox of attention is that the same things that draw our attention in can be the very things that can exhaust and deplete our attention. And part of that is because they draw us in, they require us to expend that cognitive energy to deal with whatever it is that's in front of us, which is the very thing that empties the attentional gas tank, so to speak.
yeah. So it's really fascinating. I wonder if it's worthwhile to even start with just a general definition of attention. So when you
Yeah.
say attention, like what do you mean?
Yeah, and that's a great place to try to deepen our conversation. So attention is a brain system that really we're lucky to have. It was the result of our evolutionary development throughout the course of human evolution, and it actually is something that develops very late in the human being as well. It relies on our frontal lobes, which don't fully develop till we're about 25 years old.
Mhm.
And then we've got solid frontal lobe functioning for about a decade, 25 to 35. And then there's a little bit of a decline as we age. That's part of healthy aging. So it's a robust system, slow to develop through human history. But the reason we think it developed is because the brain, as an organ, suffered a big problem, which is that there was just far more information in the environment than it could ever fully process. And so the broadest definition of attention is that it's a way to prioritize some information over other information, and that how we prioritize matters. So when we use the term attention, it's actually not one thing. It has that broad kind of anchoring umbrella quality of prioritizing, but the way we prioritize can really differ. So we can prioritize based on some information that we're trying to process. Like right now, your voice and your face are the focus, the content
Yes.
focus of my attention. But we could also prioritize based on the moment so that we're focusing on what's happening right now versus thinking about the past or the future.
Yeah.
Or we can prioritize based on our goals, what it is that we're trying to accomplish that ensures that that's where we put our energy.
Mm.
And this one metaphor I like to use is that it really is this prioritizing. You can visualize it as using the metaphor of a flashlight. So if you're in a darkened room, if attention is considered a flashlight, wherever it is that we shine that flashlight, we get brighter, clearer, crisper information, which is what I meant when I said that the brain prioritizes what is attended to. What
Yeah.
we pay attention to gets that fuller access to our brain's processing capacity.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So, it makes me think too of how much our attention is pulled, probably more than any other time in history, between our smartphones and social media and just the news cycle, 24-hour news cycles. And I would be interested in, well, I love the phrase, whatever we incline the mind toward, that's what we train. So if we are inclining to distraction, being pulled, that's what we're training, right? We're getting better at distracting ourselves. And did you want to?
Yeah. I mean, in some sense, by saying we're inclining our mind toward distraction, what we're saying is we're not holding the flashlight anymore. We're allowing
Right.
it to get pulled, like it's like a loose hold. So,
Yeah.
it's like we have it in our hand. It's that we have some agency, but the agency is very loose.
Yeah.
Which means that it gets captured by these things that are out in the world. There's nothing driving the agency as much as we could do. And we may even be doing this, I think, unwittingly. So, for example, things like in our social media feed, I would describe that there are things that are going to pull us that have nothing to do with what we might have even opened our phones to do, right? So, all this, let's say you're trying to write somebody a text message, you get some notification pop up from social media site. All of a sudden, you're kind of down a different rabbit hole. Why did that happen?
Yeah,
Well,
completely.
that happened because this sort of looser hold was, you might have had the intention to focus on the writing the text message, but the pull of that ping from the notification was enough to grab the attentional flashlight and then keep it engaged because at least when we talk about social media, it's not an innocuous just, oh, isn't it nice that we have this social media to inform us? It is a attention economy that is essentially the product that is for sale on any site that's free is our attention. That's what the advertisers are paying for. So we aren't really, what we're training is that we are defaulting to whatever it is that captures our attention.
Yeah.
That's like one problem, but there's another problem too, which is that that ping, an internal ping that would be like, oh no, but I got to go and do this text message that I have to write, right? So now all of a sudden there's this what we call getting you in a multitasking space. It's like, well, I want to be looking at this or that, and I'm getting pulled to this or that, but I also have goals. And we might even be fooling ourselves into thinking that we are multitasking, meaning that we have multiple flashlights that we're pointing in multiple directions, but we do not have multiple flashlights. We have a flashlight of attention. So when we try to do more than one thing that is attentionally demanding, attentionally engaging, we will have to make a choice because the flashlight will be only engaged in one thing. Mm-hmm. And what feels like we're multitasking is actually task switching. So we're pulling, it's getting engaged in one thing, and then we're pulling it back and moving it toward another thing.
Yeah.
And in addition to the kind of training that we might be doing by not having as much agency, loosening the grip on the flashlight, we're also exhausting ourselves. Because when we do hold that flashlight, we are constantly engaging, disengaging. And that is, we're not serving our own life, because when we put ourselves in this multitasking context, task switching context, we're going to make mistakes because it is like in fact, this is what we know from the brain science. Every time you engage in a task, the brain has to recalibrate to that task. Mm-hmm. And so now when you shift from task A to task B, there's a little bit of time it will take to kind of get everything lined up for the new task. And that, in addition to being slow, it's energetically costly to sort of rearrange the internal furniture to make it appropriate for the new
It's
task.
draining, no question. It is absolutely draining. So how do we sort of how do we get back in the driver's seat of our attention?
Yeah. I think that's a very, very important thing for us to think about. The first thing is just to start with a conversation like this, which is let's kind of take stock of what does it feel like in terms of our attention. Let's start paying attention to our attention and even understand that we do have agency over it and that it is incredibly vulnerable in this modern world. So
Yeah.
just that will help. The second thing we can do is make some very simple choices in the way that we engage with things. So, for example, if you're trying to do something that requires your deep thought and your deep attentional focus, as much as is possible, turn off all your other notifications.
Yeah.
Just silence your cell phone. I would say don't even just turn it off and keep it near you, because we know that just having a cell phone in the room is a distraction.
Yeah.
Put it in another room so that it would take a lot more for you to have to go and even look at it. Things like on social media, do not have any notifications come into your feed. You can actually turn all of those off. And even things like counts and share counts, hide all of those. Because what happens with those like and share counts is that the attention system and the reward system are kind of enmeshed with each other. We're kind of looking for that little bit of a hit we get when we
Very
get, oh, somebody
interesting.
liked it. So let's just turn that off, because then it's not another source of vulnerability. So that's sort of one level of thing, of just when you're engaging with the external world. The other one is, as much as possible, monotask. Intend and see it as a badge of success if you can do one thing at a time.
Yeah.
And if you absolutely cannot, like you have to have your phone on because you're going to get an important call from, your supervisor, well, of course you should responsibly do what's needed, but know that there will be some cost to that. You want to take a little extra care because you are going to be more prone to making errors. You're going to be a little bit slower. You may not get information processing that's as rich and deep because you're kind of fractured. The flashlight is kind of skittish and moving around too much. So at one level, there's just be aware, modify some simple things that you can do. And then, of course, there's the deeper answer, which is cultivate the mind so that it is intrinsically more capable of being attentionally steady, present, and goal directed as we'd like it to be, which I already said in our lab and others now. Out of the many things that people have attempted to do to strengthen attention, mindfulness training is the most reliable way to do that.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, I mean, just a few things you just said. Number one, the data is there that we actually we know through science that we can regain control over our attention. And then there are things that we can do to set up our environment, which is important. Shut off notifications and so forth, and mindfulness training. And I'm curious, Amishi, also, you've worked with all kinds of people, all kinds of professional groups, but the military is one of them. And I just want to give you a little bit of time to talk about your work with them, what you've noticed, what you've found, and of course, how it's transferable to everyone.
Yeah, and we've worked with the U.S. military and other international militaries. We're doing a project right now with Ukraine to try to support them as well. And the lessons learned and even the applications of the kind of resulting training modalities we have offered to other groups, other high demand, high stress groups. In about 2 weeks, I'm headed to LA to offer some of the solutions we've developed through our military work to the LA County Fire Department.
Wow.
Because again, if the intention is to be able to successfully engage your attention so that not only your performance is great and appropriate and effective, but that attention, which is also the fuel for our ability to regulate our emotions, for our ability to have successful relationships and communication on teams. You want it for all of those things. So to say a little bit about the work with the military, it really started out as a project right after 9/11, where we had service members that were on back-to-back deployment cycles. And so what we knew was that no matter what their attention looked like, and all the news was very bad, suicide rates were going up, PTSD is going up, the basic psychological well-being and effectiveness of the force was starting to really diminish and fray. And we've got incredible military service members in our military, but it's a normal response to extraordinarily challenging circumstances. So the pitch that we made essentially through a series of grants was, is there a way? Of course, we want to promote the resilience of our service members, but is there a way we might be able to make them what I basically talked about is like pre-resilient. So the idea is, if resilience means there is adversity and you can bounce back from that adversity, is there a way you might not even have to have the ball go down to be able to be bouncing back? Like, can you just stay stable, capable, and effective, even though the challenges are going to be protracted and intensive? So that was the sort of big hope, and I suggested with colleagues that we tried out with mindfulness training, and nobody had ever done this before. And really, we were the first to offer mindfulness training to active duty service members. I wanted to work with them in a very constrained, but what we knew would be a high demand interval, pre-deployment training, meaning they were just getting ready to be deployed. And this is about an 4 to 8 week interval. We gave them a battery of attention tasks. Then they went through their normal pre-deployment training. And then we gave them a battery of tasks again. In addition to attention tasks, we gave them mood ratings and stress ratings, and stuff, et cetera. The news was bad. So if we did nothing at all, just normal functioning of people going through, everybody in general got more stressed. Now they're approaching their deployment date. Their mood was worse, and their attention was worse. So now when we introduced mindfulness, the question was, can we do better than that? Can we at least protect against some of those things that we were seeing? And that led to basically the last 17 years of my lab's work. It's not only to see what happens when we offer it, but how can you offer it in the most time efficient and scalable and relatable and useful way for them. And what we've found is that, yes, you can offer training, even though it is a high demand interval that is going to make them vulnerable. And the solution looks something like an 8-hour, 4-week training program with about 12 minutes of mindfulness practice done daily. So you have about 8 hours with a trainer over 4 weeks, and then 12 minutes a day, 4 days a week for 4 weeks. What we found was that their attention was stable and not depleted and degraded over high demand intervals. And the even better news was that for people that practiced more than 12 minutes a day, some of them even got better than where they started, even though their colleagues who got no training or practiced less were diminishing in their attention and in their mood. So
it's so hopeful.
That solution feels to me not only hopeful, but doable. Like,
yes,
figure out how to do 12 minutes in a day. And if soldiers can do this while they're preparing for war, I mean, I think I can, hopefully. It motivates me. And personally, it motivates me to say it's worth the effort.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in many of our classes, we use that, Amishi, we use the 12-minute because it seems to work and people love it. And so that is just so incredibly encouraging. And it also just the idea of being able to regain some control over our attention takes a little bit of practice. So even, if I'm reading a book but I feel pulled to do something else, the practice has helped me notice the impulse, right? Like I can notice the impulse and then just renounce it, like, okay, and just go back to the book. And that little thing has been so useful to me as well.
Exactly. And I love the way you directly made it relevant to our real life, because of course, as wonderful mindfulness teachers, you're allowing people to understand how to practice formally, where it's separate from life in some sense. But what you just described is why we practice, which is bringing it into our lived experience. And from a neuroscience perspective, the training we do, in fact, I would, with my military colleagues, refer to it as a push-up for the mind when we talk about mindfulness practice.
I love that.
When we do these push-ups, we're not doing them just for the heck of it. We're doing them so that in our day-to-day, moment-to-moment life, that feeling of agency we can connect to, so that you're right. It's like, oh, I want to go check my phone instead of finishing this thing I'm reading. And then you may say, okay, I'm going to go check my phone, but you're not doing that blindly and without your knowledge. You're doing it with whatever you do. You're doing it with your awareness and your sense of agency intact. And that
Yes.
really, I think, matters. So,
Yeah, we're not yanked around, I think unwittingly, right? Is the word that you used, which I love, where because that is often what happens. But I think as we practice, wittingly comes into the picture so that we actually know what we're doing.
In working with a group like the military, I know it can probably be difficult to get the training to all the members. I know you've been thinking a lot about how to use novel technologies in order to get the training into the hands of people. Can you talk a bit about that project?
yeah, absolutely. And so, a very timely question because our entire journey has been to make it more scalable and accessible. And one path has been training military trainers to deliver the training so that they can be the ones. And what we found, in fact, in our research is that when the trainer isn't familiar with the military, or frankly, isn't familiar with whatever context they're delivering it in, it's just not as effective. I mean, I think it sort of makes sense. Somebody that knows the challenges you face, et cetera, is going to be better able to make the training more effective. And we found that in our research as well. But another approach that we've taken on more recently at the Department of Defense's request, after my book came out, part of the end of the book was describing this training path, the formal 12 minutes a day, 4 days a week. In addition to the sort of the explanation for what attention is, why it matters, and they asked me to turn the book into an app. And so right now we have an app called pushupsforthemind.mil that is freely available to all military service members, reservists, National Guard, and all military educational institutions. And then, of course, a lot more people than the military want to see if they can benefit from this as well. And we heard that. I mean, our work with firefighters and teachers and students and athletes, and there's so many groups that also, our attention in the global moment is strained. So we will be releasing a public version on the App Store, hopefully in a couple weeks. And the idea here is that there's no ongoing subscription. It's a single training path that's evidence informed. And I'm a researcher, so I couldn't help it. So we've built in metrics that people can self-assess how they're doing, their mood, their focus, so to see how they're progressing as they do it. So that's one approach that we're taking is a digital training solution. And the key to say to that is, we have plenty of apps. The world is not lacked for mindfulness apps that you can download. But what I really wanted to offer is something kind of direct, kind of start to finish and ongoing support. But what's really exciting now is that our military colleagues have reached out and said, is there a way that we can involve the human trainer back into the picture? Because that's what really makes the training come alive. So we're working with some groups right now in sort of a flipped model. So people do the app and progress through the path, but they meet with a trainer. And the trainer, by the way, could be just a leader within their organization or an instructor in a course for just 10 to 15 minutes weekly as they progress through this sort of 6 to 8 week training path. So there's the human connection and there's the actual training they can do within the privacy and flexibility of their own schedules with the app.
It's beautiful. I just wanted to thank you as well for all the work you're doing with these groups, military, firefighters, teachers. I'm curious, Amishi, are there any sort of dream groups that you haven't had the chance to work with yet that you're thinking, all right, these folks would really benefit from this training if they had the chance to experience it?
Yes, but I'm not going to share who they are. I think anybody can guess in this moment who we want to have more mindful in our society. But I will say one of my dreams is to actually make it so that this notion that the mind, like the body, can benefit from daily exercise in a broader kind of our cultural understanding of that is part of the dream, is part of what I work towards. So I guess the dream is that it becomes so normal, so normative that of course you're going to exercise your mind. I mean, going for a run or swimming in your pool, nobody thinks that's weird. Getting on a bike and going nowhere and taking a spin class, that's not strange. But still, broadly speaking, closing your eyes and exercising your mind is a little bit off-putting to many. And we want to normalize that because everything about our research is suggesting doing
Right.
that for as little as 12 minutes a day can actually strengthen our minds.
I want to just hold up Amishi's book because, yeah, just really wonderful and relatable. Yeah, I am just so grateful that you took the time to be with us today and, look forward to what's coming out next and the app and, what a wonderful service for our military, for the firefighters, for teachers, really for everybody, because we all need it.
Absolutely.
And the science says it works.
Got it. Thank you both. I really had a good time.